these people. They're just bad.
It's a crime spree that's haunted South Australians for 3 decades.
It's a case that is full of as many myths and suppositions as it is truths.
He was held for a week, drugged for control, and died of an injury caused by sexual assault.
His body was in a number of pieces.
Mum was screaming, no, no, Alan's dead.
Every weekend, someone would have been picked up.
He is one of the worst sex offenders that Australia will ever encounter.
For years there have been rumours that a gang was involved.
A group of respected professional men, killers.
The idea was that Adelaideans would be shocked if they knew who was responsible.
We call them the old school Thai gang.
The innuendo was that they were untouchable.
Jane, Anna and Frat taken in an instant.
Nothing, and not the slightest sign of any evidence.
After more than half a century, what happened to the Beaumont children?
It changed the psyche of South Australia. It changed everything.
Adelaide has had a very bad run of sex killings, kidnappings, disappearances. She'd been strangled and dumped.
The body count in Australia's worst serial killing has risen to 10.
South Australia has a new chilling chapter.
Most had been mutilated, their legs and feet cut off. People could just disappear off the streets.
Established in 1838, the South Australian Police Force is one of the oldest in the world. Over the course of the last 180 years, their ability to catch some of the country's worst killers has been proved time and time again.
You know, go on. You're under arrest for murder of Aimee McGlynn. Okay, so you have to come with us. Come around here.
But some cases remain shrouded in mystery. It was the week before Christmas in 1971 when Patricia Schmidt finished work for the night, but never returned home.
16-year-old Patricia Schmidt raped and murdered after finishing a late-night shift at Burger King Darlington.
She was waiting for her father, but unfortunately her father was running a bit late, so she decided to walk home. Her body was found later that day at Hallett Cove.
21 years later, 12-year-old Rihanna Barreau was left home alone for a few hours during the school holidays.
Police investigating the disappearance of schoolgirl Rihanna Barreau. They're checking reports of an unconfirmed sighting of the 12-year-old last Wednesday.
They've been told the girl was seen by a road not far from her home on the afternoon she went missing.
She goes to the Milford Vale shopping centre and buys some cards to send away to friends. When her mother comes home, the front door is locked. Cards are there, but where is Rihanna Barreau? No one knows.
One of Adelaide's oldest and most intriguing mysteries is the case of the unidentified Somerton man.
A well-dressed man found dead on Somerton Beach in 1948 with just a few strange clues as to who he was and where he came from.
Investigators had discovered his suitcase 14 kilometres away in a locker at the Adelaide railway station. His clothes had been detagged and there were very few clues on his body. However, tucked into his fob pocket was a small piece of paper.
It had the words Tamam Shud, which means the end.
The piece of paper came from a Persian book of poetry, and when the corresponding book was discovered thrown into the backseat of a nearby car, police discovered what appeared to be a code written into the book.
No one has ever cracked the code. A lot of people have tried, lost sleep. Ever since, still trying to identify.
Over the years, rumours have arisen about a secret love affair and links to Cold War espionage. But after more than 80 years, the case remains a riddle that may never be solved. Sean Fuster, author of the book City of Evil, believes that such mysteries point to a defining characteristic of South Australia.
South Australia has a national reputation, and a deserved one, for being the secrecy state. Throughout the 1990s and the first decade of the 2000s, we were the undisputed champions of the suppression order. In excess of 300 suppression orders every year.
A suppression order, sometimes known as a gag order, is a directive approved by a judge to prevent the publication of information during a trial.
I'm not going to deny that suppression orders have value, sometimes. There is obviously a lot of value in making sure that information that is central to a police investigation shouldn't be made public.
But after 16 years as a court reporter, Sean believes the history of the suppression order is tainted with excess.
There is really no limit to how outrageous suppression order applications can get. When you're simply trying to make sure that nothing about your client gets out so that you can control the narrative, you're over the line. And unfortunately, what we see in South Australia is far too many people over the line and far too many judges willing to indulge it.
When it went to court, the bodies in the barrels case alone accumulated 220 suppression orders. Since then, new legislation limiting the number of gag orders has been successfully enforced. But to this day, Sean believes that the courts overstepped the bounds of necessary confidentiality.
At the end of 2017, in a 21-day period, South Australia's judges and magistrates imposed 21 suppression orders. Some of those orders suppressed evidence. Others suppressed the reasons for suppressing that evidence. It's beyond a code of silence. It's a culture of silence.
Nothing exemplifies a culture of silence and secrecy more than one series of horrifically disturbing murders. 5 boys butchered, some cleaned and redressed, and all of them dumped.
A series of unsolved killings by a group of homosexual predators.
A group of respected professional men. Killers who are prominent, even eminent Adelaide citizens.
Growing up in Adelaide in the 1980s, you didn't fear the boogeyman. You feared a white van that was going to come up on the side of the road, pull you in, and then you'd vanish forever.
It shocked Adelaide, a person capable of dismembering another person.
It's a crime spree that's haunted South Australians for 3 decades.
It's a case that is full of as many myths and suppositions as it is truths.
All were drugged and held captive, in one case for up to 5 weeks.
The suggestions, the rumour mill, the innuendo became absolutely rampant.
We seem to draw the unusual, the sick, the deranged killers in Adelaide.
If there's one case that speaks to the very foundation of crime in Adelaide, it's the family.
One of Adelaide's greatest murder mysteries started with the disappearance of 16-year-old Alan Barnes.
He was a joker a lot of the time. He was just a normal kid. Our age difference was only 3 years. We lived in the same room. We'd go to the footy together. All my firsts in life, Alan was there.
On Sunday, June 17, 1979, Alan Barnes was trying to hitch a ride home on Grand Junction Road. From there, he vanished.
During that week that he disappeared, he was gone, out of sight.
That week was the worst in my life. We were searching everywhere.
Alan Barnes' body was discovered a week after his disappearance and just days before his 17th birthday.
He'd been thrown over the rails of a bridge on Adelaide South Para Reservoir, northeast of Adelaide.
He was held for a week, drugged for control, and died of an injury caused by sexual assault.
A post-mortem showed he died from hemorrhaging and shock, caused by lacerations to the anus, allegedly by a bottle.
Alan had been cleaned and redressed before being dumped at the reservoir. The news of his murder had a devastating impact on the Barnes family.
Mum was screaming and she was smashing her arms against a coffee table that we had. Screaming, no, no, no. I still today cannot get over that scream. It tore my guts out, that realisation, Alan's dead.
The investigation was unable to identify the murderer, leaving the Barnes family without justice. Little more than a month later, a fisherman discovered the body of 25-year-old Neil Muir in the Port Adelaide River.
Neil's body was found floating in 2 garbage bags. Neil had been dismembered.
26-year-old Neil Muir, whose body was found in bags in the Port River, is a victim of a vicious gang.
His body was in a number of pieces. Some of the remains had been scun and they were stuffed inside of his torso.
Neil's head had been severed, but then retied to his body, and some parts, including one of his testicles, were missing. It was one of the most savage murders in South Australian history, yet the autopsy uncovered some chillingly familiar details.
Upon examination by the pathologist, it was discovered he had a significant anal injury. Analysis also revealed the same drugs in Neil Muir's bloodstream that were in Alan's bloodstream.
It appeared that Adelaide had a serial killer on the loose. However, police made the decision to keep the connections between the 2 murders from the public. In the dark about the link, imaginations were left to run wild about the depth of evil lurking in the city. Two years later, another young man disappeared from the city in the dead of night.
Mark Langley was 18, and in February 1982, he didn't come home after a Saturday night out. His body found a week later in the Adelaide Hills. Like Alan Barnes, Mark had been redressed. The circumstances of his death sinister and familiar.
Post-mortem examination revealed the same drugs were found in Mark's bloodstream. He suffered a significant anal injury, almost identical to that of Alan Barnes and Neil Muir.
As well as undeniable similarities, there was something shockingly different about Mark Langley's body.
An incision, approximately 11 centimetres long, had been made in his abdomen. That incision had been sutured together and bandaged. Further examination revealed that a section of his bowel was missing. The pathologist's likely explanation for the incision being made was for an object of some description to be recovered from Mark's rectum.
The horrific wounds revealed something chillingly clinical developing in the killer's methods. And it wouldn't end there. Within 4 months, a farmer would find the remains of 14-year-old Peter Stognev, who had been missing for almost a year.
Stognev has been missing since August the 27th. He's believed to have wagged school and was going to meet friends in the Rundon Wall. That meeting never took place.
The unusual aspect to Peter's remains were that his skeleton had been severed into 3 pieces.
When Peter was examined, the position of the cuts was similar to the position of the cuts in relation to Neil Muir.
And there were more correlations. 2 of the victims had been redressed before they were dumped and had sedatives in their bloodstream. 3 had suffered sexual assault. 3 of the boys had been operated on after their death, and 2 of the victims had been dismembered. But in the course of their investigation, police discovered an even stronger pattern starting to emerge.
Detectives took dozens and dozens of statements from young men at the time, and they told police virtually identical stories of how they were picked up, offered a drink, only to discover they'd been drugged, and when they awoke, they realised they'd been sexually assaulted.
Tonight, for the first time, we're able to bring you a witness who was actually captured. This young man was lucky to survive. What were you saying to them? What did you do?
Oh, leave me alone, please leave me alone. Don't, all that. Then someone else climbed in the bed, ended up to be a bloke, and they said there's nothing you can do about it.
The survivors' stories confirmed that they were not looking for one serial killer, but a group of them.
They had established that there was a group of homosexual men who commonly picked up male hitchhikers, drugged them and sexually abused them, and then released them.
What happened then?
Thought I was a dead man, to tell the truth. Lost about 3 hours of my whole life. I don't know what happened after that. I just passed out.
John escaped the next morning. He ran for his life.
That was the sort of evidence that made our suspicions and theories fit.
And I would say every weekend someone would have been picked up.
Detectives were now on the hunt for a ring of rapists and murderers. At the same time, speculation across the media was tarnishing the memory of the innocent young victims.
The media made the victims the perpetrators, believe it or not. It was to distance themselves, and people wanted to distance themselves from this sort of thing. If we make these kids to be drug addicts or to be homosexuals, oh, it can't happen to my little boy Johnny because it's their fault that they're in that situation. And the truth about it all is that these poor boys were nothing more than victims of a horrendous crime.
But when the killer struck again, everything changed.
When the next abduction occurred, it would essentially blow the case wide open.
It changed the psyche of South Australia. It changed everything.
The elegant streets of North Adelaide have been inhabited by some of the city's most influential people. On July 5th, 1983, they gained notoriety as a crime scene after the abduction of 15-year-old Richard Kelvin.
Richard was on his way home. He was a couple hundred metres from his house. Residents in the area told police they heard car tyres and they heard raised voices of a number of men and then silence. Richard was gone. What set Richard's abduction apart was the fact that he was the son of a high-profile South Australian Channel 9 newsreader.
The latest abduction would garner unprecedented publicity across Adelaide.
It changed everybody's thinking. They weren't saying, oh, it's just these rebel kids. Everybody started to go, well, this could happen to my kid now.
The killers weren't picking off working-class boys in the poorer suburbs. They were attacking the heart of the Adelaide establishment. In the intensifying glare of the spotlight, detectives worked furiously to find Richard.
The police launched a campaign with advertising, rewards, virtually anything they could to try and prompt a breakthrough.
The proof that it could happen to anyone put the city on edge. As the public held their breath for news about Richard, investigators zeroed in on their prime suspect. 7 years before Alan Barnes was murdered, in May 1972, two gay men were out walking by the River Torrens. In a spot known as the city's #1 beat, it was a popular place for homosexuals to meet. Around 11 p.m, they were viciously attacked and thrown into the river. One man, Dr. George Duncan, drowned, but the other survived with the help from a passerby.
He managed to scramble out of the river, but in the process broke an ankle. He staggered up the bank and was picked up by a chap by the name of Bevan Spencer von Einem.
Bevan Spencer von Einem was a young gay man who happened to be in the area. He was applauded as a good Samaritan after rushing the victim to hospital. But years later, von Einem would come to police attention again, just 2 days after the death of Alan Barnes.
The phone started ringing pretty much straight after Alan's body was found. One of the callers provided information on Bevan Spencer von Einem.
It was brought to their attention by a young lad who was in the car with Bevan when they picked up Alan.
But when police finally contacted von Einem several weeks later, he denied knowing Alan Barnes. However, he did admit to knowing Neil Muir. This connection was enough to spur detectives into looking into von Einem's movements.
He was in the habit of picking up young male hitchhikers, drugging them and sexually abusing them.
Von Einem had been practicing for a long while with his associates, but getting the evidence is always the problem. You can strongly suspect something, but if you haven't got the evidence that you can go into court with, you're in trouble.
Von Einem had been linked in some way to each of the victims, either through witness statements or his own admissions. But detectives were forced to look beyond the allegations and rumours in order to find a solid connection.
Police had obtained prescriptions for drugs obtained by Von Einem that were the same drugs discovered in the victims' bodies, which essentially told the detectives that they were in the right direction.
By July 1983, as police were building a case against Von Einem, the public anxiously waited for news in the search for Richard Kelvin. He had been missing for 7 gruelling weeks, when on Sunday, July 24th, his body was discovered in the Adelaide Hills.
The 15-year-old son of Channel 9 newsreader Rob Kelvin was abducted and held captive in a drugged state for 5 weeks before being murdered.
How Richard's parents coped with that knowledge, I think horrific doesn't even come close to it. The community was shocked at the thought of a young lad being held captive for so long.
Richard Kelvin had died from the same injuries sustained by Alan, Neil and Mark. His bloodstream contained the same drugs that had been fed to the other boys, the same drugs that had been prescribed to Von Einem. This time, however, the investigators found hard evidence linking Von Einem to the murder of Richard Kelvin.
Forensic officers recovered literally hundreds of fibres from Richard's clothing. Those fibres were conclusively matched to Von Einem's cardigan, to the carpet in his hallway, and even to the bedspread on Von Einem's bed. Von Einem was arrested, denied all knowledge of Richard's murder, and he went to trial.
37-year-old Bevan Spencer Von Einem is charged with having murdered 15-year-old Richard Kelvin. Von Einem has pleaded not guilty to the charge.
In the mid-stages of the trials, when he was confronted with the mountain of forensic evidence, he changed his mind and offered to give a further statement.
During the committal hearing, Von Einem made a remarkable turnaround in his story. He told police he'd met Kelvin on the day he disappeared, and that Kelvin had voluntarily got into his car and later gone to Von Einem's home. Von Einem claims he later dropped Kelvin back in town and gave him $20 for a taxi fare.
It was essentially the nail in his coffin.
Bevan Spencer Von Einem was found guilty and sentenced to 36 years without parole.
Von Einem is one of the worst sex offenders that Australia will ever encounter.
With the savage murders of 4 boys still unaccounted for, the public's obsession with the case refused to wane.
So then it started all the rumours.
A gang was involved, a group of respected professional men, killers who are still free.
We call them the old school Thai gang.
The innuendo was that they were untouchable.
In Adelaide, South Australia in 1984, after a string of brutal murders, sex predator Bevan Spencer Von Einem was sentenced to life for the murder of 15-year-old Richard Kelvin. Despite the conviction, the media's fascination with the murders refused to go away.
At that stage, there was speculation that the cases were linked, but police had not made any public statement.
In 1988, a coronial inquest finally declared that they believed Bevan Spencer Von Einem had not acted alone, and that the killing of 5 young men was the work of a group of sexual predators.
So then it started all the rumours and things just got worse and worse.
Then in September 1988, a primetime national news program gave the case a name.
It's one of South Australia's longest-running murder cases. For years there have been rumours that a gang was involved, a well-organised ring of homosexuals known as the Family.
It stuck almost immediately. Pretty much the first time that this term was used to describe the group, it became synonymous with the case.
Speculation about the members of the group became absolutely rampant.
A group of respected professional men, killers who are still free. Many of them prominent, even eminent Adelaide citizens.
They were said to be high-profile politicians, lawyers, doctors. The idea was that these were people that Adelaideans would know, that they'd be shocked if they knew who was responsible.
We call them the old school Thai gang.
How high up are we talking?
About as high as you can get.
The innuendo was that they were untouchable.
The sordid rumours about those responsible went beyond the case and created a commentary on the city itself.
This case really taps into this belief of a two-tier system in Adelaide, of the higher-ups and everyone else.
There definitely is a class system in South Australia that is very, very prevalent.
While the class divide may have fueled the rumours, Nigel Hunt believes that they have no basis in fact.
The suggestion that judges, politicians and high-profile businessmen were involved was simply just not true.
So how did the atmosphere of secrecy create this corrosive culture of suspicion?
Police were hamstrung in exactly how much they could tell the public. They weren't in a position to outline the identities of their suspects.
Over the years, the police have dispelled the rumours about eminent South Australians, and to this day, the names of their actual suspects have not been revealed.
Police have 4 suspects. Von Einem, obviously. The second suspect is an eastern suburbs businessman who's now in his 70s. The third suspect is a doctor who lives and practices in Sydney. Fourth suspect now lives in Brisbane, driving buses. He was a male prostitute when he was in Adelaide. He is suspected of being in the car that abducted Richard.
While the monsters that committed these killings remain free, those who have lost their loved ones fight to keep their memories alive.
I believe that anybody who you carry in your heart is always alive. They can only take the physical part. So Alan is still alive in my heart, yes.
As observers, we can only wonder whether this lack of resolution could be one of the sparks that gave life to the Adelaide murder myth. There is another case that suggests it could be.
3 children from the one family on their own down the beach.
Jane, Anna and Grant Beaumont never returned home on Australia Day in 1966. Their disappearance ignited a mystery that has both haunted and fascinated Australia for more than half a century. '60s Australia was a land of sun, sand and sea. A worry-free country where everyone knew their neighbours and stranger danger was a foreign concept.
9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Anna and 4-year-old Grant taken in an instant.
The police case files reveal Jim and Nancy reported them missing to police at 5 p.m.
The Beaumont children left the family home in Somerton Park at 9:45 a.m. and caught the bus to the beach at Glenelg. They were seen playing on the grass by the foreshore, but they were not alone.
Witnesses saw a man lying on a beach towel looking at the children.
Shortly after 12 o'clock they saw the man in the previous area described in company with the 3 Beaumont children. He would be approximately 6 foot, slim build, fair complexion.
Then there was one final sighting.
The children then went to Wenzel's Bakery. They paid for it with a £1 note, but their mother had never given them that much money. And then they left, never to be seen again.
Nothing, not the slightest sign of any evidence or something left, not a thing here.
In the summer of 1966, Adelaide was shaken by the disappearance of the Beaumont children.
9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Anna and 4-year-old Grant taken in an instant.
Nothing, not the slightest sign of any evidence or something left, not a thing.
The children were spotted twice on the Glenelg foreshore before they vanished. Once with an unknown man.
Beyond that, everything is mere speculation.
The boss at the time worked on the theory the bodies had always been found. Because our attitude was, if you haven't got a good lead in the first couple of days, you know you're in for the long haul.
The lack of progress wasn't due to lack of effort. The public response to the shocking abduction was extraordinary.
public interest in this case, rather than lessening as the days have gone by, has increased to the extent where we see an amazing sight, a sight which I'm sure has not been duplicated in South Australia before. Thousands of people and hundreds of cars lining every inch.
But the search of surrounding waterways and beaches revealed no traces and left detectives with one puzzling question.
I can't come to grips that one person could handle 3 children on his own without some other person either helping him or seeing him and giving you some sort of a clue of it.
The disappearance of the children marked the beginning of a loss of innocence in Australia and left behind 2 devastated parents.
I don't believe that the children are dead, and I'll cling on to the hope until there's any evidence found otherwise.
They left the children's rooms exactly as they were when they left. They didn't touch them, hoping that if they did come back, there was a room for them.
Jim and Nancy Beaumont not only suffered the loss of their children, they also had to endure the relentless media attention and the ensuing theories.
Abduction theories ranging from white slavers to flying saucers.
The search took an even more bizarre turn 6 months after the disappearance.
Mr. Croysett actually saw sand falling over them while they were still alive.
A Dutch clairvoyant came to Adelaide with his own theories.
It's interesting to note that when Mr. Croysett arrived in Adelaide, detectives believed his presence was more of a hindrance because the public became fixated on him and not the recollections of the day.
Mr. Croysett believes that they played in a hole or in a dig out.
That is my main meaning in something like it.
And that particular hole or cave must have collapsed.
His theories resulted in not a single positive line in inquiry for detectives at the time.
The fellow they got to drive Croysett around rang me up and he said, Ken, he said, he's a con man.
Over the following years, the case attracted more bluffs and dead ends, creating further anguish for the parents.
A cruel hoax in the late 60s, a teenager sent a letter to the Beaumonts claiming it was from Jane. The letter said she and her siblings were living with a man in Victoria and to meet them at a location. Detectives took Jim and Nancy there, but no one showed.
A stupid act committed by a young person, which he's got to live with now.
I deal in admissible evidence, not phone calls or visions and clairvoyance, etc.
With no evidence to guide them, and despite the public attention, the investigation stalled. Seven years later, 2 young girls were snatched from the bustling crowds at Adelaide Oval.
Kirsty Gordon and Joanne Ratcliffe were last seen leaving a footy match at the Adelaide Oval in the company of a tall, slim man. They have never been seen again.
The father of one of the missing children, Mr. Les Ratcliffe, has made an appeal for the safe return of his daughter Joanne and a 4-year-old friend, Kirsty Gordon, who were abducted from the Adelaide Oval on Saturday.
Whoever is holding Jane and Kirsty, I'm appealing to you personally to come forward or let them go.
This morning, police are no closer at this stage to locating the children.
Well, we don't have too many abduction cases. There are very few parallels, actually.
Does this make your job more difficult?
I think it does make it more difficult because it's a matter of what people may have seen, and if nobody sees anything, it's particularly hard to formulate a picture of the events.
As time goes on, are you becoming less hopeful that these 2 little girls may be alive?
We like to think all the time that we can recover these 2 children alive, and that is uppermost in their mind.
Curiously, despite being packed with people, there was only one man at the Oval who saw anything.
One of the tray boys saw a person with 2 kids and he thought at the time, gee, he's rough handling them.
You're the only man in Adelaide who's seen this person's face.
That's right.
Can you describe him for me?
He had a large-brimmed, light brown hat. He's clean-shaved. His face is narrow, pointed at the chin.
After that single sighting, there were no further developments.
A lot of us were of the belief that the Adelaide Oval could have been done by the the person who did the Beaumonts. No evidence of it, but both amongst crowds, both in daylight, and no bodies. They're the similarities that made me think that the same person could have been responsible for them.
The police found no concrete evidence. That fact in itself has fueled infinite stories and speculation.
There have been dozens of theories put forward regarding the Beaumont abductions, countless scenarios, countless suspects put forward.
Theories range from satanic cults to South Australia's deadliest sex predator.
Bevan Spencer von Einem was linked to both their abductions by a key witness who told police that von Einem had, in fact, confessed to him.
The allegation that he also killed the Beaumonts comes from a Crown witness known as Mr B, a former associate of von Einem's. According to Mr B, von Einem admitted to picking up the 3 Beaumont children, to murdering them, later dumping their bodies south of Adelaide. Police have already acted on the allegations. They have been searching the Maiponga reservoir.
Police divers and major crime conducted an extensive search, but did not find any evidence that von Einem had taken the children.
Despite the array of debunked theories, the South Australian Police have never given up.
There's always a possibility of solving this case, but obviously that window is getting smaller and smaller as time passes. There is no crime scene. There's nothing to submit for DNA analysis. This is a case that won't be solved by technology. This is a case that will be solved by people. We have $1 million award for anybody who provides information that helps to solve the case or that helps to recover the bodies of Jane, Anna and Grant, and we'd like nothing more than to pay out on that reward.
But the publication of a sensational book threw an extraordinary new theory into the ring.
Millionaire businessman Harry Phipps's son claimed that his father was the Beaumont's killer.
In the book, the son claimed that the children's bodies were buried in his father's factory.
After more than half a century, police have spent the days trying to unearth what happened to the Beaumont children.
The disappearance of the Beaumont children has baffled the Adelaide police and public for more than 50 years. Despite wild theories and help from clairvoyance, no one has managed to find the missing children. Then in 2013, a book was published that put forward yet another suspect, and this theory echoed the myth of the family murders.
Millionaire businessman Harry Phipps's son claimed that his father was the Beaumont's killer.
A well-connected, wealthy man, Phipps bore an uncanny resemblance to the identikit picture created in 1966. However, Phipps had died in 2004 and could not defend his name against the unsubstantiated allegations.
His son's revelation highlighting new information that the children may have been buried at a factory the Saturn man once owned.
The book's accusations triggered an unsuccessful excavation in 2013. And then in 2018, amid swirling rumours of new evidence, police again returned to the factory.
One by one, items were unearthed, examined and photographed, then dismissed by experts as animal bones or rubbish. After 8 hours of searching today, there is no trace of the Beaumont children. So this is a disappointing end to a day that had begun with so much expectation and so much hope.
With no evidence to connect Phipps to the crime, the quest for justice for the Beaumont children continues. More than 50 years after the event, the national media interest in the Beaumont search highlights how deeply this single crime still affects the people of Adelaide.
There wouldn't be a South Australian who hasn't given some thought to the fate of those 3 children and what they may have endured.
I don't know, you've got a pride in your community and you don't like those things to have happened in your community. Well, I certainly don't anyway.
The people responsible for these sort of crimes, I don't think they've got a conscience. They're just bad.
I think any unresolved murder has an impact on the community. the fact that there are people walking free who have taken another person's life troubles members of the community. But I think particularly in high-profile matters, such as the family murders, the Beaumont children, Ratcliffe and Gordon, the fact that they remain unresolved adds to their mystique, and it cements them in South Australia's history for that reason. And they simply are not going to go away.
South Australian police continue to investigate these unsolved cases to this very day. We urge anyone with information that could assist the police to contact them. These chilling mysteries, together with some of the country's most brutal serial murders and mass killings, have helped forge the myth that Adelaide is the murder capital of Australia.
8 people were discovered in sealed vats in a disused bank vault at Snowtown, north of Adelaide.
Australia's worst serial killers.
As the murders were going along, it was just getting too late to do anything. Like I should have done something after the first one, but as it got to 2, 3, 4, 5, it's just getting too late to do anything.
It's one of South Australia's longest-running murder cases. A group of respected professional men, killers who are still free.
We absolutely are not the murder capital. The fact that we have a very low murder rate and a high clear-up rate clearly demonstrates that South Australia is a safe place to live.
It's all about the bizarre crimes. It's all about the strange crimes. And that's what I really wanted to get out there. It's that extra element that turns Adelaide into what it is. Something about a crime that happens in Adelaide will be bizarre.
But for author and court reporter Sean Fuster, beyond the bizarre and brutal crimes, there's a far more important story to tell. About the people who have been taken before their time and the loved ones they've left behind.
I'm passionate about court reporting because I think it is the best job in journalism. You actually get to do something that's really important, and that's give victims a voice.
Carly was the light of my life. I miss everything about her.
They can only take the physical part. So Alan is still alive in my heart, yes.
And for those we have trusted to defend us against such evil, perhaps there is a simpler and more terrifying truth.
It just doesn't relate to one particular city or one state. There's been some pretty horrific stuff other places as well, all over the world, all over Australia. And it's going to continue.
There will be more abductions, more rape murders, more people disappearing. That's the fact of life. I'm sorry to say.
There's evil everywhere.